Let's get to our panel right now. Joining us for more, Song Zhang is the Washington, D.C. Bureau Chief for Shanghai Wen Hui Daily. Arthur Dong is a professor at Georgetown University here in Washington. From New York, Myung-koo Kang is a professor at Baruch College at the City University of New York. And Jonah is a senior political strategist at the RAND Corporation. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Song, this was a highly secretive, unofficial visit by Kim Jong Un to Beijing. He was invited by the Chinese Xi Jinping. Let's listen to how the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lu Kang described the visit.
We are willing to work with the DPRK to continue giving play to the guiding role of high-level exchanges, deepen strategic communication, expand exchanges and cooperation, actively promote peace and development, consolidate friendly people-to-people exchanges, advance long-term sound and stable development of China-DPRK relations so as to benefit the two countries and the two peoples, and make new contributions to peace, stability, and development in the region and the world.
What's the significance of this visit?
I think it is very significant visit, and I think it's one of the most important event in this DPRK issue in the last couple of years. And people say by inviting Kim Jong Un to visit Beijing, China is returning back to the center of the stage, and China will remain to be the most important player on DPRK issue. And also, I think China wants to capture this opportunity, especially considering Mr. Kim is going to meet Mr. Trump in May. I think China wants to make sure this run of denuclearization process to be successful. And also China, we have been in difficult situation with DPRK in the last couple of years due to especially this nuclear issue. And I think China is very clear that we will object any nuclear program by DPRK, but if DPRK is ready to drop its capacity and nuclear program, we are determined, we are willing to help them have a final kind of resolution through international kind of discussions.
All right, I want to get back to that in a moment, but let's go to New York to Myung-koo Kang. This visit by Kim Jong Un to Beijing comes only weeks before the DPRK leader is scheduled to visit with the South Korean President, Moon Jae-in, as well as, of course, with that meeting with President Trump that's going to take place in May. What do you think is going on here?
This meeting is very important. As Mr. Zhang pointed out, it's a kind of diplomatic breakthrough between China and DPRK, North Korea. But we need to think about clear masses. First of all, President Xi Jinping made a clear signal to the United States that China is a major player in dealing with the crisis on the Korean Peninsula. But at the same time, from the North Korean point of view, they made it quite clear that we are not alone. So delivering a clear message. And as also at the beginning of today's show, the reporter pointed out that, North Korea made it quite clear that gradual approach in terms of denuclearization. So how to denuclearize the North Korean nuclear capability is one of the most important issues. On that issue, the Chinese side and the North Korea side emphasize that peaceful resolution is the critical, way of dealing with the current crisis. From that point of view, this meeting, in a sense, quite greatly diminished the effectiveness of U.S. military threat against North Korea, and any kind of regime change attempt, which has been, highlighted by the newly appointed National Security Advisor, Mr. Bolton. So this meeting is make the overall situation going on the Korean Peninsula should be dealt with multilateral, but at the same time bilateral dialogue and consultation.
Arthur, there's, as we just heard, a great deal of great power politics playing out here. The Washington Post had a story on this meeting today in which it said that the message sent by the visit is, quote, any moves on North Korea must go through Xi. Of course, course, that's a reference to President Xi Jinping. Do you believe that to be the case?
Oh, absolutely. What we saw yesterday was a very clear demonstration that however, as President Trump might have thought that this dialogue was going to be between Washington, D.C. and Pyongyang, all roads lead to Beijing. Very clear that Beijing is going to have a great deal of influence as well as a great deal of say in terms of what the outcome will be with regard to this upcoming negotiation between President Un and President Trump.
Jonah, of course, there has been a response from the White House, from President Trump. It came in the form of a tweet. I want to read that to you. It said, received message last night from Xi Jinping that his meeting with Kim Jong Un went very well and that Kim looks forward to his meeting with me. In the meantime, and unfortunately, maximum sanctions and pressure must be maintained at all costs. Firstly, has this meeting that took place in Beijing in some way taken the thunder out of President Trump's meeting with Kim Jong Un? The other is, there was another statement from President Trump in which he said, this meeting took place because of pressure from me.
I think that's what Mr. Trump believes. I'm not so convinced of that. I think that Mr. Kim is pretty much in the driver's seat here. Obviously, it will be Xi who is calling the shots at the macro level, but the thing we've got to remember here is that every North Korean leader for the past 30 years has been looking for a summit with an American president. This is not something that has been imposed upon Mr. Kim. This is something that Mr. Kim and his father, and to some degree, potentially even his grandfather, have been desperately seeking throughout the entire into the past century.
Song, as we heard from Myung-koo Kang, does this meeting make it now more difficult for the United States to talk about a military strike on the DPRK or regime change of any kind? Is the message that was sent, was it that this relationship, the DPRK's relationship with China, is an enduring one despite the efforts by the Americans to isolate the DPRK?
I think China has been very consistent to claim that this DPRK's nuclear issue should be solved in a peaceful manner, and China is ready to help. And we also welcomed the development when Mr. Trump accepted the invitation from Kim Jong Un to have a summit. I think we believe that is a kind of positive development. But we also have been opposed to any military strike as a way to solve this DPRK issue. And not only it will create a lot of humanitarian disaster, but also it will make the nuclear arsenal and others to be out of control. I think that is going to be a very, very big catastrophe in this peninsula, and China is neighboring North Korea, and we are going to be the biggest sufferer if anything happens. I think China is now working on two ways at the same time. From one way, through this summit, China make it very clear that we want denuclearization. But from another angle, we are trying to send to White House and other countries a very clear signal that we oppose any unilateral military strike to DPRK. And I think that is going to be a consistent demand from China.
Right. Myung-koo Kang, when we look at the visit that took place in Beijing, when we look at the other diplomatic activity that is planned, this is ultimately about the nuclear issue on the Korean Peninsula. But what are the options here for the DPRK, for China, for the rest of the world?
Right, but before that, jumping onto that, specific denuclearization method, but this summit meeting with President Xi and Kim Jong Un demonstrate to the rest of the world that Kim Jong Un is not such a crazy or irrational kind of guy. And Mr. Blank, briefly pointed out that Kim Jong Un is on the driver's seat in terms of in dealing with the neighboring countries in this situation. Important message is that here in the United States, one of the fundamental assumption or claim against the North Korean regime is that Kim Jong Un is basically unreliable and crazy and irrational kind of guy. That's the fundamental assumption in terms of highlighting the imminent nuclear threat against the United States. But going through this summit meeting and arranging a summit meeting with South Korea and then suggesting to even the summit meeting with the United States, President Trump, Kim Jong Un is demonstrating to the world and other neighboring countries that he's not that crazy and he's not irrational kind of person at all. So in terms of dealing with this denuclearization issue as well, newly appointed Mr. Bolton seems to prefer Libyan style, direct and immediate solution of the nuclear capability of North Korea, even demanding direct access to those nuclear facilities and then missile, cargoes or such kind of thing like Libya did. But from the North Korean regime's point of view, nuclear capability or missile capability is a fundamental guarantee of its own regime survival and then security. So from that point of view, North Korean regime repeatedly requested that certain conditions, guaranteeing the regime or the society itself should be guaranteed. And so gradual denuclearization can be carried out. That's the message.
Okay, we are going to have to take a break right now. Coming up, DPRK diplomacy with other high-level meetings planned. Is Kim Jong Un looking to chart a new course on the Korean Peninsula? Stay with us, you're watching The Heat.